Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Our agenda is about to begin. Please have a nice seat. Thank you very much for preparing yourself to join our guest lecture. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. The Honorable the Dean Faculty of Health Sciences, Professor Dr. Budiaji, the Honorable Vice Dean, Profesor Yunitasari SK PhD, Muhammad Nanang Himawan Kusuma, MSc Sportmed, the Honorable invited speakers, all lecturers, distinguished guests, and all participants. First of all, let's praise our God Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, the most gracious and merciful. Peace be upon Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the last messenger of Allah who has guided human life from the distraction into the right way. On behalf of the organizer, we would like to extend a warm welcome and express our gratitude for participants in this guest lecture. Thank you very much for taking time to attend our agenda. Let me introduce myself. My name is Umi Faza Rohma, Master Ceremony in this afternoon on Monday, 1st July 2024 in our guest lecture at Hall of Faculty of Health Sciences. This event is proudly presented by collaboration among International Relations Office, Faculty of Health Sciences, Jenderal Soedirman University, and Newcastle University. The recent guest lecture will discuss about scientific writing for academic purposes. To start our opening ceremony today, allow me to read the agenda. First one is opening, and the next one is Sing Indonesian National Anthem and March Faculty of Health Sciences. And the third, welcoming speech from the Dean of Faculty Health Sciences, Jenderal Soedirman University. And next one is photo session. The main agenda is presentation about scientific writing, followed by discussion, and the last one is closing. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let's start our agenda by reciting Basmalah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much. Okay, move on to the second agenda, which is Sing an Indonesian National Anthem and March of Faculty of Health Sciences. Honorable ladies and gentlemen, please rise for sing the Indonesian Anthem, Indonesia Raya, and March Faculty of Health Sciences, Jenderal Soedirman University.
Jadi pandu ibu
you very much, and please sit it again. Ladies and gentlemen, now step on to the following agenda. This is a welcoming speech from the Dean Faculty of Health Sciences, Professor Dr. Budi Aji. To Professor Dr. Budi Aji, kindly move forward to the stage.
Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honorable guest lecturers, Karen and David, welcome to our faculty, Faculty of Health Sciences, Jenderal Soedirman University. Dear colleagues and my student, good afternoon everyone. This afternoon we have a special guest from the Newcastle University, Karen and David. So big applause for both of them. I think it's a good opportunity for us because they try to manage something for you, try to deliver something for you. It's related with how to write academic writings, and they try to elaborate with artificial intelligence. Well, it's really fantastic thing. It's really fantastic machine that we cannot avoid. For that, we have a short discussion in our meeting room, and the growing of the technology is really fantastic. I mean, and we have to see in a both sides. Sometimes we use it in a negative purpose, but sometimes we can, of course, we can use it as a positive way how to deal with this technology. So I think all the students as well as our colleagues who come here, you will get something that maybe Karen and David already experienced about this. So please share your experience as well as knowledge to all of us. So I hope all of you can discuss with them, of course. Try to ask something that we don't know, for example, and try to maybe learn something that we never have it. Because it's first time for us actually how to use, for example, AI for academic purpose. So many, I think like when we look at in our media social media, so many offer from some person who try to give training how to use AI for academic purpose. Now you get a free for this afternoon. So thank you very much, Karen and David also. So hopefully all of you can enjoy these lectures. Don't feel free to ask something, and hope you have fruitful discussion for this afternoon guest lecture. Thank you very much, and hopefully you can enjoy and have fun. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Budi Aji, for the warm welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, to documentation, we are going to have a photo session. Please come forward to the stage, and please to our committee to guide the photo session. Ladies and gentlemen, currently this is the time for us to listen the main lecture and discussion. There will be two special guest speakers from Newcastle University who will deliver lesson about scientific writing, they are Associate Professor Karen Elizabeth Math, PhD, and Associate Professor David Andrew Newby, PhD. So I will make a brief introduction about our guest speakers. The first speaker is Associate Professor Karen Elizabeth Math, PhD. She graduated her doctoral degree from University of Newcastle. She is a teaching focused academic in the School of Biomedical Sciences and Pharmacy at the University of Newcastle. Dr. Matt has published in the area of teaching and learning, marsupial reproduction, healthy aging, dementia, and potentially inappropriate medication used in older people. She has H index of 19 and more than 65 international publications. Now allow me to welcome the first speakers, Associate Professor Karen Elizabeth Matt. The time is yours.
Okay, can I get the slides? How do they? There we go. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. I do hope that the things that we share with you are going to be helpful to you, and that it will be some benefit to your writing. And scientific writing is hard, okay? It's very difficult. Even when we are writing in English and we're English speakers, it's even hard for us. So I don't imagine how hard it is when English is your second language. So hopefully some of the things that I can share will be helpful to you. We'd like to leave these textbooks here with you. They have sections on scientific writing in there, so hopefully you can use them after we leave to continue to help you with your writing. So maybe they can be shared around as they need to be. So we've already had an introduction from me. I am a teaching-focused academic. I'm a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy, which is based in the UK. I'm a student academic conduct officer, so a lot of my work in that area now is around the incorrect use of AI by students when they're not supposed to use it. So it is important that we learn to use it in the right way. And our whole talk is not on AI, but we will have a little bit of information about AI throughout the session. This is David. I'll let David introduce himself now.
Hello, and yes, thank you for this opportunity to come and talk to you all today. So my name's David Newby. I am the head of pharmacy, the pharmacy discipline in the School of Biomedical Sciences and Pharmacy. I'm a pharmacist by background, and I am also involved with our drug decision body in Australia called the Pharmaceutical Benefits Advisory Committee. I sit on that as the pharmacist representative for that as well.
So David will be along a little bit later in the session, so we'll start off with me. And these are our session objectives, so to think strategically about publication, to learn effective strategies for structuring and writing scientific papers, to consider ethical ways to use AI in writing your manuscript, to review skills in data presentation and manuscript submission, and to understand how to respond to reviewers' comments. So that's a lot, hey? We got a lot of objectives this afternoon. Okay, so why do we write as scientists? Well, there's quite a few different reasons that we write. There's no point in doing our research if we don't share it, right? If it doesn't make it out of from the four walls of your laboratory, it's not going to have an impact or a benefit to others. So it's very important that we do share our research so that everyone benefits from it. It might be the requirements of your employer or your funder as well, that you publish your results in scientific journals. It also enhances the reputation of yourself, but also your institution. So it's very important for both of those reasons to publish, and to publish the very best papers that we possibly can. And it's also important for your own personal career progression. By publishing, then that will enhance your reputation and increase your ability to be promoted and work your way up into the higher positions in the university. There's so much to do even before you start writing a scientific paper. So let's start to think about some of those things. So if you are going to prepare your work for publication, you need to think about the best place to publish it. Where is it going to be appropriate, and where is it going to reach the audience that it needs to reach? So you need to find a journal that has a target audience that is suitable. Someone, an audience that is going to appreciate and be able to use your research. So looking at whether the aims and objectives of the journal match your research, whether the journal publishes the types of articles that you are going to write. Is it a standard kind of, scientific manuscript format? Or maybe you are doing a systematic review, maybe you are publishing a protocol, or maybe you are publishing an interesting case study that you've come across if you're in the medical faculty. Are you looking at a specialised journal, targeting a very specific audience? Or do you want is this a really big, significant finding that you want an interdisciplinary audience? So, are you going to aim for something high like Cell or Nature or something like that that's got quite a broad readership? And some of the ways to find that is like, what journals do you commonly cite in the research? So that's a good place to start. If you are reading research articles, where do they come from? What journals are they being published in? And that's going to be a good starting point for you to find or to identify the journal that you should publish in or target your research. Where are other authors in your area publishing? You might also need to think about journal quality, and that's important. To know that journal is peer-reviewed. In terms of reputation for yourself and for the institution, it's much better if you can go with a journal that's got a very high reputation. So some of the important things to look for is that the journal is peer-reviewed and it's got a fully transparent peer review process that is published on its website. Does the journal have an impact factor? How many people read that journal? So the higher the impact factor, the higher the number of people that are reading that journal and the more people that are going to read about your research. Is the journal included on a discipline ranking list? And I've included a link here. Scimago is a free journal discipline ranking list. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, but you can look up any journal that you may want to publish in, and you can get some information about the journal to make sure that it's good quality and it can also help you identify journals that you might want to publish in. So you can put in the discipline area that you're working in, and it will give you the link, the list of journals with all of their rankings. So that can be a really useful place to look, and that's completely free. It doesn't need any subscriptions. So is the publisher of the journal a member of a recognised professional association that's committed to best practice in publishing? So we need to be really careful when we're publishing these days, because there are a lot of predatory or fake journals out there. So you don't want to get caught up by being attracted to one of those fake or predatory journals that will want to take your money, and they will publish your paper, but it's not going to give you a good reputation. Does the publisher display unethical or deceptive publishing practices? And there's another website here that will help you with identifying a journal, and it's called the Think, Check, Submit site, and it will help you to identify trusted publishers for your research. So that's another place to check. So that one's also free, doesn't require any subscriptions. So once you've looked at the relevance and the scope and the quality of the journal, you might also want to consider where the journal is indexed or listed so that people can find your research. So what databases is the journal listed in? The EASE guidelines, and this is, I think, an interesting one, and it's guidelines for authors and translators of scientific articles to be published in English. Okay, so there are guidelines on these for a bunch of different languages, including Indonesian. So that is also going to be a useful site for you as well. So what about the results section? No? Conclusion, you're not writing your discussion first. No, so do we think maybe we should have had a poll everywhere for that one. Sorry. No, it's all right. Okay. I'm going to tell you what section I write first. Okay, and that's the results section. Okay, it's, starting with the introduction. The introduction is so hard, right? Especially if you are writing in a second language. With your results, you know your results, okay? Get your results written. It tells the story of your manuscript, okay? The results are really the most important part because it's what you're reporting, right? It's got the key new information that you're reporting on. So describe and show what you found and stick to telling what the data is. So no conclusions or discussion go into that section. And it needs to be structured as well. So start with a brief introduction to connect the results with the research question, and then present your findings in a logical way. So writing a research paper is kind of like telling a story. So you have to make a story that has a logical flow to it. So maybe you did your experiments not in the same order. It makes sense to present it in a different way. So just because you did the experiments in a particular order doesn't mean that's the most logical way or presents the best story. So think about how you can make a nice story and include a combination of text and visuals. So graphs and tables and figures and diagrams. and then end with a summary paragraph that leads into the discussion section. So this is just a little annotated example of the way that you can structure the text in your results section. So starting with some introductory context, so it's very brief. In this case, it's just saying, you know, how many snake bites were reported to this particular agency for a particular time period. Then start including your relevant findings, refer to any tables or figures that you include. Again, list your next finding, how it fits in with the research question, and so go through each of your significant findings that way, and then finish off with the summary of those key findings. Figure legends. So when you draw a figure, it needs to have a legend. So for figures, it is always underneath the figure and has to fully describe it. And you want to be able to understand that figure without referring to the text. So someone who is educated in that area should be able to look at that figure, read the figure caption, and understand what is in that figure and the significance. So each of the figures gets numbered consecutively. If there's multiple parts, they're labelled with A, B, and C. They don't have a title above the graph or the figure. And there's basically 3 parts to a figure legend. So first part is like a title. It describes what the main point of that figure is. The next bit is then a little brief description of the methods that were used in preparing the information in that figure, and then a sentence describing what it actually means. So this is just an example of a figure legend with that structure. So it's a 2-part figure, so there's an A panel and a B panel. There is a kind of a first statement that is like a title, so the BSA concentration. So this is like the title, and then there's this section, the next sentence, which is describing briefly the results, and then describing what's in the 2 different panels. And then like a summary that there was a positive correlation showing as BSA concentration increased, absorbance increased. So they're the 3 main elements that you want to have in your figure caption. Similar here, this time it's a photographic image. Also, if you're using microscope images, you need to have a size bar indicator. And when you are working with figures, okay, you don't adjust the brightness or the contrast of the image unless you do it equally across all of them. So you can't manipulate what you're showing in those figures, and you shouldn't crop it to change the meaning of the figure. If there are any adjustments that have been made, then you need to report those. This is a table, so with tables, the table title is always above the table. Usually it's quite a brief title. Any abbreviations that are used in the table need to be explained underneath the table. And so make sure that any significances are described down underneath. So there's a checklist for the results. Are the key findings clearly described? Do the tables and figures present the data in a clear format? Are the key findings supported by the appropriate analysis? So if you're claiming something, it needs to be supported by the statistical analysis. Have I avoided interpretation of the findings, because that's what happens in the discussion? Do the figures and tables stand alone without the need for further explanation? So that's making sure that your figure legend and your tables are well constructed. And are the figures and tables referred to correctly in the text of the results? So if you're referring to a table, you need to make sure it's referred to in the text. Once you've got your results section written, you can then write your methods section, because the flow of the methods section is going to pretty much follow the flow of the results section. So the methods section is describing what you did, how you did it, and what you used to do it. So how was the experiment performed and all the conditions that it was completed under, details of the instruments and equipment, any of the techniques that were used to collect data, and how it was analysed. And provide enough detail for someone to repeat the experiment. That's the key point with the methods. It should enable another researcher working in the same area to do exactly the same thing and get exactly the same results, so that they can replicate your findings and build on them. So with the methods section, make sure that you adhere to the specific guidelines. So this is where some of those guidelines, like the consort guidelines and the strobe guidelines, give you very specific information about how to structure your results. And you want to structure this section as well so that it tells the story of your research. So the story of the methods is going to reflect the story that is provided in the results. You've got sufficient details to enable replication. Make sure if you've used animals or humans in your research, there has to be ethics approval for that, so that needs to be reported, and also the statistical methods that were used. Okay, once you've got your methods and results done, it's time to move on to the introduction. So that's really setting the scene. What's the background and the context for the experiments and the results that you've done? So what's been done before? Where are the gaps? What's missing? What still has to be resolved? And why is it important to answer the particular questions that you're asking? And what are those particular questions that you're asking? And this is where your annotated bibliography is going to come in really handy, because you've got all that information summarised that you can drop in and, you know, start using it as for structuring your introduction. So there's three main parts of the introduction. So start broad. Okay, it's a really broad, introducing the general field of the research, or the, you know, whether it's a health problem that you're working on. The next section then is to summarise the previous research and issues that are related to that topic. So that sort of puts it in the state of play. Where do we stand at the moment, and what are the gaps? And then the third part is stating your specific aims and hypotheses. So it's quite difficult writing an introduction. This is an example of an introduction that is not well written. Maybe it's like a very, very first draft, and as a very, very first draft, maybe it's a starting point. What would we need to do, or what's wrong with this introduction? maybe I'll give you a couple of minutes to talk about it at your table. Yeah, let's have a chat about it at your table for a minute or two, and then we can, maybe one table can report back what you would need to do to improve this introduction. Okay, now that you've had a little chance to discuss, David's got a microphone, so he's going to go around and has anyone got anything to share about what's wrong with this particular introduction?
Any thoughts?
Thank you. My name is Haryati. I'm from Department of Nursing. As I know in introduction, we have to make comparison between like the article 1, 2, and 3. But in this part, I think the writer look like make explanation, not make like argumentation. What is the gap between 3 articles? But only explain like article 1, what is the result, and article 2 and 3. But actually in introduction, as I know, we have to make like what is the similarity or maybe the differences and what is the gap, and it is why I want to research this part. It is my understanding. Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect answer. Well done. So it's not just about, it's about making a story. Okay, all of those, and David just said to me, he had a supervisor, he said, that's just a bunch of postage stamps that don't tell a story, that they're all facts that are correct, but they're not integrated into a coherent story to give a summary of the field. So they're a starting point, okay, they've collected the information, which is an important starting point. But then the next step, integrating that information to make a story. Another AI tools that can be useful is one that discovered recently. So AI for improvement of English text. PaperPal is one specifically for scientific writing. So that is one, I haven't used it myself yet. So it's one definitely I think to check out. So if you are able to, put your draft together and put it then into paper PAL, it will help to improve the flow and the structure of the introduction. And likewise, Grammarly, I think some of you already are using Grammarly for that sort of thing as well. Okay, when it comes to AI for generating content, it gets into a much trickier situation. So you can use AI, and this is a paper where they describe using ChatGPT for creating a title for an abstract. So it's really great at giving you ideas. You could ask it to create 5 different titles and use it to, find one that's the best or the most appropriate, or that you can use as a starting point. So using AI in scientific writings, there are some advantages and disadvantages. So in terms of the benefits, it can really help you get past that barrier when you're writing, because often you sit in front of your computer and want to write the perfect sentence. AI can help with getting past that by, breaking things up into smaller regions. So programs such as Elicit or Research Rabbit can help you find the right references that you need and summarise those references. It can help improve the title of your manuscript and the abstract and the conclusion so that it matches the journal's parameters and scope. It can help you be more thorough. So you might have missed something. So you can put some information into AI or ask it to search in a particular area. You might find something that you'd forgotten about. An important one, facilitating composition by non-native English speakers and decreasing inequalities existing with native speaking researchers. So, and I think AI is going to be included more and more into the tools that we're using. So Microsoft Office, it's going to have AI included in it very soon. And if you're into developing code, it's also good for that. The disadvantages, and it's important to be aware of disadvantages, is that AI doesn't understand the information that it's giving you. And so it's not going to be able to generate that, that insight or that analysis that a human brain can generate. So your brain is still much better than AI, right? It can, repeat things, but it can't be creative like the human brain can. So yeah, just be careful that it has potentially reduced creativity. And if you're a young researcher or a young writer just starting out with writing, maybe it might, harm your development. So it's important to go through, the pain when you're writing and develop your skills so that you have those skills. And AI can certainly help with that, but you also want to develop your own skills as well as the skill to be able to work with AI as well. AI can't be an author on your paper, okay? So the list of authors is, who did the work, how did each author contribute? And the order matters. So in science, usually the first author did most of the work, maybe had the idea. The last author is usually the head of the laboratory, maybe the person who got the funding or got the overall aim. And then the people in the middle contributed in some way, like doing some experiments, maybe help with the manuscript, analysing data. So AI cannot be an author, and that's because AI cannot take responsibility for the words and the ideas that are presented in the paper. Because they can't take that responsibility, they cannot be an author. Okay, you need to acknowledge if you used AI in the writing of a manuscript. So if you used it writing, making the images, collecting the data, you need to fully disclose that you did that in the acknowledgements or the methods. Okay, so discussion, by the time you get to this discussion, you're nearly there. So sometimes they're combined in short reports. They start with a summary of the major findings and not just be a rewording of the results. This is where your human brain comes with your creativity and interpreting the results of what it means and where to go in the future. So this is a bit of a checklist. What do they mean? What's your interpretation, your opinion? How does it compare with other studies? What are the strengths of your research? What are the limitations? And finish off then with a general conclusion. Okay, then the final thing is the abstract. And I think it helps with an abstract to think of it as 5 sentences. Basically, the introductory sentence, the main aim and the hypotheses, 1 sentence of methods, 1 sentence of results, 1 sentence for conclusion. So it's really hard to write an abstract, but I think following that structure really helps. Okay, I'm going to hand it over to David now. Because once you've written your article, you need to submit it. So your job's part done, half done. This is the next step.
Thank you. And just to say, that abstract is really important for this second part in submitting your article, because it is what's often sent out to reviewers who will read it and make a decision about whether they should or shouldn't review it, or whether it's worth reviewing in their mind. So getting the abstract right is quite important. So what I wanted to do is just go quickly over the peer review process if you're not familiar with what happens once you submit an article for publication. Just to stress that the key aim of the peer review process is about a quality control, making sure that the paper is significant, and importantly, and keep this in mind when you get your reviewers' comments back, it's around improving the article, okay? So it's about making the article better. It's not about attacking people or trying to make themselves feel better by being negative about an article. It's about improving the quality. That's the key component. So there are 3 main types of peer review process. The most common one involves a single editor or an editor-in-chief who does a very initial review of the paper to judge whether it's in the scope of the journal. And then they will send it out to multiple reviewers to do the peer review process. So that's the most common type you'll encounter. The second type is called an editorial board. So they'll have several, maybe 8, 10 people, academics, that are on the board, and they will do the review process. So they look at the article, they do the whole review of it, and then they provide the feedback and make the decision about whether it's involved. This is a very slow process, and so it's not often used, and there are only a few examples. Circulation is one journal that uses this editorial board approach, and it can be quite slow. The third type are professional editorial teams. So these are well-resourced journals. So they're things like The Lancet, the British Medical Journal, who have lots of money and can actually pay professional reviewers and editors. So they do it all in-house, all within the journal, but they are paying people as their job to do these reviewing. So again, not a very common way of approaching it. The most common is the single editor reviews it and then they send it out for peer review. So the first step in your submission that is critical is the covering letter. So every article needs to be accompanied with a covering letter, and there are a number of key points that are recommended to be covered in the covering letter. So firstly, you should put the editor's name and title. You can get that from the journal's webpage. If you look up, it'll say the name of who the editor is. You should always address it personally to that particular editor. So not just the editor, try and find the actual name of the person who is the editor for that journal. Then you have the manuscript title should be in there. Then there should be a statement about that the paper has not been published or being considered for publication anywhere. And then there's a brief description of the research and why it's important and why readers will be interested. And I underline that because that is the key factor that is considered in the peer review process. Is this important work, and would it make readers want to read the article? Please remember that scientific journals are like newspapers. They're there to sell their journal. So they look for things that they believe are going to be attractive to their reader. Just like an editor of newspaper looks for a sexy title and a nice, writing piece that they know will sell newspapers. It's the same thing for medical journals and scientific journals. It's about selling journals. So that's what you need to keep in mind, is that the editors and the peer reviewers are going to be looking to see, is this exciting? Is this going to make people want to read their particular journal? Yeah, and you have to have your contact information, and you should have a declaration that there's no competing interests as well. They're the kind of general structure. It doesn't have to be in that exact order, although usually it starts with the title of the journal. So I've got an example here of a covering letter. So for those that maybe can't read it, I'll read it out. It says, "Dear editor, please find attached our manuscript about vaping among high school students. We think it's an important topic and should be published in your journal. We surveyed some high school kids and we found out that what they think about vaping and how often they do it. Our findings showed lots of kids vape and they don't really know it's bad for them. This could be useful for people who make health policies or work in schools. This paper hasn't been published anywhere else and the authors are okay with submitting it. We got the necessary permissions." What do you think of that as a covering letter? Pretending you were an editor and you were sent that to cover. Does that tell you a lot about the paper? Would that get you excited about this particular study? Does it clearly state the title, for example, of what the journal article is called? Is that there? There's no actual statement of the title. It just says a manuscript about vaping. So it doesn't actually clearly state what the title was. Does it clearly state that it's not being published or considered for publication anywhere? There's one brief comment that says this paper hasn't been published anywhere else. But you need to go further than that. You also have to say it's not being considered for publication in other places as well. And the language, knowing that English is not your first language, is very casual, the way they've approached it. Some kids vape. It's not very technical. It's not very scientific in the way they've written it. It's been very casually written and not very scientifically written. So if you're a scientific editor, you wouldn't be very impressed right from the start that these people approach things with a lot of scientific rigor, if you like. So here's an example of a better one, and there's no way you can read this, so don't worry. But the important thing to note is it's a one-page submission. So your covering letter should never be more than one page, okay? One page for your covering letter. So I've broken it up into the parts to make it hopefully a bit easier to see. So you can see here, Importantly, they highlight clearly what the title is, that the study is called High School Children's Attitudes and Practices Towards Vaping, a Comprehensive Study. So they've made a very clear statement about the title, what exactly it's called. They've also given a summary around the gap in the literature, just a few sentences that say, why is this study important? What was known and what did we try to address in trying to do this study? And then the important bits. They summarise nicely in a few dot points the key findings. So the editor doesn't have to go searching through what did they find. They've got 3 key findings, and they make a clear statement about why this would be important to the journal. That this is the findings have implications for public health policies and educational strategies, and by understanding this, policymakers and educators. So the editor will be able to judge quickly, does this fit the scope of our journal? Are those the audience of our journal? And if you've done your homework right in the parts that Karen's talked about, then you've hopefully picked a journal that you've got the right audience for. So this is where you stress that the audience is right. And then the last bit, they make a very clear statement about that it's not being published and it's not under consideration. They make statements around the authors, all the authors had approved the manuscript, and that they've adhered to ethical standards of their particular institution, and any appropriate institutional review boards were involved. So they make it very clear that they are doing the right thing about submitting this to one journal to be published. So that's a way of structuring a much better letter. And the covering letter, as I said, is really important because the editor reads that, and often that could be as much as it goes, and they don't bother reading anymore if that's badly structured and badly written. So it is important to try and get that right. So quickly, the types of peer review. So once in that most common one where an editor has read it and then decided, this is in our scope of our journal, we'd like it to go out for peer review, it's sent out to academics for review. The most common type is called single-blinded, meaning that the reviewer knows the authors of that paper, but the authors of that paper will never know the name of the reviewer. So that's the single-blind part of it. Double-blind means neither party knows. So you don't know who wrote the paper, and neither will the authors of those papers know who reviewed their paper. That is not used very often. Newer types of review processes are things like transparent reviews, meaning that the peer review that you might write, or the person writes, gets published alongside with your paper. So both your paper and what the reviewer thought of it is published simultaneously. Collaborative ones are even newer, and that's where they actually allow the reviewer and the authors to work together. So they can actually get in contact with each other, have a conversation about how to improve the paper or where there's some uncertainties, and work in that way. And then the final one, which you see a bit, is post-publication review, meaning that once the paper's published, other readers can put their views about the paper in. That means there's usually some kind of discussion board or discussion forum attached to the paper where people can add their own comments about it. So it's still gone through the peer review process, but now that you also get the people who read it to have their own peer review or their own views about it. There are obviously pros and cons of each of these type, and you can't control it as a person submitting which one you get. But just to say, the single blind and double blind, single blind being the most common, the advantages there is that the hope is that the reviewer can give an honest review because they know that their name will never be released to the people reading it. So the thought is that you can get more honest reviews rather than some of the transparent ones where they may be afraid to be honest because they know that their views are going to be seen by other people as well as what the paper was. So it's easier to recruit reviewers in the double-blind and single-blind type, harder to get them to do the transparent type because they're a bit afraid of being identified with their name against the review. But the downside is that it can work you could get somebody in a single blind or double blind way, or single blind way. They may be very negative about the author. They may have a grudge against the author. And so they might write a bad review just because they don't like the authors. Not because it's a bad paper, because they know that they can hide behind anonymity, they can write whatever they like. So that's a downside of it. It doesn't happen really, to be honest, very often. And that's why you have multiple reviewers. You'd never have one single person. So they will pick multiple people from different places. The advantages of the transparent ones, though, are it's been shown that they tend to be nicer and friendlier when they write them because they know everyone's going to. So they're a bit more constructive. They provide more, maybe nicer, written in a way that's a little bit more constructive rather than negative, which often when you get your reviewing comments, they can sometimes be quite negative. So this is a checklist, and this is important to know. This is essentially what the reviewer is going to be asked to do when they look at your paper. So they will go through these headings. The first and second one is the really important one, the importance of the work and the originality of the work. So they are going to be judging the importance and the originality. They'll have to look at the strengths and weaknesses of the methods. They will have a look at your interpretation of the results, the way you discuss your limitations, and finally, the suitability for publication. So they will make a recommendation to the editor around whether they believe this should be published or not. So in responding, they will often have those things in a checklist, a yes, no. They'll have to check off yes, no to each of those questions before they also submit a written review of your document. That will never be shown to you, so you will not know what they said about those individual questions in the yes-no format, particularly the one that says, should it be published or not? You will not find that out. That's only sent to the editor. Then you get the written review, the report, which goes to both the editor and to you as an author. And then there is a confidential section where the reviewer can raise any issues they have that might be ethical. They may have concerns that there may have been manipulation of the data or the figures, as Karen mentioned. They may be concerned about plagiarism, anything that's not scientifically ethical. You, again, will not see that. That will only be sent to the editor. So the editor will have all that, and then they will make a decision. And if they decide that they would usually like to go to the next step, they'll send you the reviewing document, the review. So, how do you respond to those? I know the first time I got my review, it was so disheartening. It was so depressing. I thought I had written a really great paper. Surely there can't be that many problems with it, and yet I get a A4 page of issues with what I thought was a pretty good journal article. But always remember, if you get sent this with a revise and resubmit, that means you're a bit closer to getting it published. It's looking good. So it's not 100%, but you're at least in the right direction, that the editor has said, this is good enough to go for the next step of revising it based on these recommendations in the review, and you may then get we'll now submit it, or we'll now publish it in its format. So I just want to give you a few tips on how to respond. First thing is, read through all of the comments carefully, line by line. Make sure you take on board every single comment that's made. Tiny minor ones like a spelling mistake, through to major ones about your methods or the sample size or something like that. It's really hard to keep important to keep your emotions in check. Be professional when you're responding to them, not try and vent your anger back to the reviewer venting there. It's a bit like when I write emails to students. Sometimes I have to put it aside for a bit of because I might have written it a bit nastily, so I'll think about it and resubmit it with a bit more, or send it on with a bit more care and thought. But it is really important to keep your emotions in check. It's very easy to say, you're an idiot. I stated that in paragraph 3. That might be what you feel, but unfortunately that's not what you can say. You have to be professional about how we do it. And that means expressing gratitude a lot, even when you might not want to say thank you for raising that issue. You might want to say you're an idiot, but you say thank you for raising that issue. I'd just like to kindly point out that in paragraph 2, we address this particular issue, blah, blah, blah. So you do have to sometimes be humble and say thank you and we appreciate, and words like that, which I'll say a bit more about later. Importantly, organise your response. And the way I like to do it, and what's some recommended by people, is to make a response table. So here's an example from one of my own journal articles. So this was a journal submitted to the European Journal of Psychiatry, and we had conducted a study on screening tools for depression used by pharmacists. So what we were doing was looking what screening tools would be appropriate to be used in a pharmacy who might want to adopt screening. So you can see here, you have the issue verbatim, so copy the whole sentence of what the reviewer said, and then outline how you address that. So for this, so I'll address the second one. So the second one said how self-administration was defined. Did the study have to involve self-administration tools to be included, or did the tools just have to be capable? And my response was the survey tools only had to be capable of self-administration throughout the manuscript, with the exception of the last paragraph of the introduction. We only refer to them as being capable. The final paragraph has now been edited to reflect this. So we changed, the only time we didn't say capable was in the final sentence of the background or paragraph, so we corrected that. We just changed it on their behalf. It's important to know you don't have to accept everything that they have. It's okay to not, and I'll talk about that in a bit more. So there are two main types of issues that will get raised. There are modifiable ones, so they are things like requests for more details about the methods or requests about the tools. It may be suggestions for additional analysis. It may be clarity of your tables or figures. These are usually the easiest to address. You simply have a look and say, yes, that seems reasonable, I'll change the name, or we'll change the figure title to better reflect. They are usually quite easy to address. But you don't have to address every single one. So this is, again, from that same reviewer. This was actually reviewer 2, who raised in table 1, said we should consider including gender differences in terms of men or women when looking at the results or the tools. And we stated that while this is interesting information, we didn't have any hypothesis that there should be a difference in using the tool between men and women. So we didn't believe that that would be useful. And also it meant what other demographics should we also explore? Where do we draw the line? So we countered our argument. We laid out why we did what we did. So if you make a firm and well supported argument saying you don't want to do what the reviewer is, that's okay too. But it does have to be well constructed and well supported for a reason why you don't want to change or do what the reviewer wants to do, okay? The harder ones are the non-modifiable ones, and these certainly when you are very early in your writing career and you get it, you go, what am I going to do? Because they're things like, they say your sample size was too small, or your duration of your study was too short. Well, there's nothing I can do about that now. My study is my study. It was run for 8 weeks, or it was conducted with a certain sample size aimed. And so you may feel, well, all is lost. It doesn't have to be. Again, It's about making a compelling argument for why what you have done is still okay. And that may mean you have to go back and strengthen your discussions in your limitation section to discuss why, despite the sample size being too small, it was sufficient for the purpose of this study, sort of thing. So it may be re-emphasising that this was an exploratory study, or this was a pilot study. This is why the sample size was the sample size. So this was an example, this is too small as well to read, and these again are real, not mine this time, but other examples. You know, the reviewer said the data set was too small for a psychometric test. And the response was that, well, although the data set was small, they believe it was still important because it was a new tool and it was important to get some initial data out about this new tool, and that this could lead then on to further research down the track. So recognising it, and they've said we've titled the paper Preliminary to acknowledge this. So you can address what might seem insurmountable, unmodifiable problems, but you need to have a good, strong argument about it. So the key is a strong and compelling rationale for what you've done and why you've done it. Okay, a few more tips. Firstly, make sure you address every single comment. Don't skip over any. Make sure, even if it's down to the minor things about grammar and spelling, usually easy enough just to accept their suggestion, up to the complex ones. So every single line of the review needs to be addressed. And again, you have to be very polite and respectful. So lots of we welcome, we acknowledge, we agree, we thank. Maybe you're starting sentences in your review. You know, we thank the reviewer for identifying this. However, and then you can go on and give your compelling argument. But it's often nicer to start with a we thank you, we thank, we acknowledge, and those type of things. Also make sure you might be the lead author, but unless you are the only author, you have other co-authors that can help you on this. So you shouldn't be your task and your task only. And when you resubmit, have a very brief covering letter that just thanks again the reviewer's comments and thanks the editor again for the opportunity to resubmit, and hoping that we have now addressed the issues to the sufficient for your for publication. So just to summarise, and this is where we'll finish, the covering letter can make or break, because it is the first thing the editor will read and make a decision about whether they want to do the next step of sending it out to review, even though they should then read the paper anyway. Try not to take it too personally. Make sure that you maintain professionalism. And really important is to always remember that this process is about improving the paper. And always, the addressing of the comments will always improve the paper. There is no doubt about that. So even if you get rejected, even after you've done address them and you send it back, there's still a chance the editor will go, well, I still don't think we want this paper. If you're picking another paper, at least now you've got some new extra quality to your paper because you've had some review from people, okay? Obviously, before you do this, it's often useful to have your own peers review it for you. So have other people in your department read through your paper and adopt the same view. Can you look at it like a peer reviewer? Look for all those things and get them to peer review. And when you get the opportunity to peer review, take that opportunity, because it gives you that experience of being on the other side and knowing what it's like, and you get to see what other papers are like in your field, in your area. So peer reviewing, while it takes a lot of time and it can seem quite daunting to do, particularly when you're early in your career, it is actually a great way to find out what the other side of the process is like, and that's going to make your submissions of papers better when you go forward. So I encourage you to try being a peer reviewer if you're invited and you've got the capacity and it's within your scope, then to try that as well. And that's the end of my section, and now we've got 15? How long? 15 minutes? So Karen will come back up and we'll open it up now for questions from the audience. Anyone?
Okay, thank you to Mr. David and Mrs. Karen. The audience, is there any question? Please raise your hand. Okay, not yet.
We've done such a good job, we've covered everything perfectly.
Maybe for me it's okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I have some question. This is basic question. The first one is why we have to publish our research activities to the journal. And the second one, maybe you can give some suggestion or tips to write concise and clear introduction. And the last one, maybe for beginner, how to find match journal with our research. Maybe it is some difficult part before we submit the journal.
Okay, so
Thank you.
The first question was, why do we publish? Was that?
Why we have to publish our research in journals?
Why should we publish our research in journals? Well, when we're doing our research, if we don't publish the research, no one is going to know about it, right? Usually we do the research because we believe it's important. So it's important often, to human health. If we're in the health faculty, we want to, we're doing experiments to try and improve the health, find out more about a disease, prove that a treatment works. So it's important that we publish it so that other people working in the field are aware of it. And even if we're in the early stages, publishing our research can allow others to build on it as well. So that's an important thing. If we don't publish it, no one outside the four walls of our, lab knows about it. So it's very, very important to publish. And it's also good, for you personally, for your career, to develop a profile of publications to improve your career progression. And it's important, for the reputation of your university as well. And the next one?
The next one is how to write the concise and clear introduction.
Sorry, how to?
How to write a brief and clear introduction section, because you mentioned before that introduction is the most difficult part.
The introduction?
Yes.
Yeah. So how to write a more concise introduction. I think it's start writing. Maybe it's not going to be concise on your first draft. So start the first draft, and I think that's the problem that with a lot of, younger students. They're like, oh, I've written it, here it is. But you might do, 5, 6 drafts of your introduction before it's finished, okay? So start with your first draft, and maybe it will be too long, but also get your co-authors. Usually in health and science, we don't work alone. So if you come with your first draft, get someone to read it for you and give comments to you about that draft to help make it better. And even if you write it, put it aside for a while, do something else, and then you come back and read it and go, oh, I can make that better. Yeah. Did you have anything else on that?
No, that's exactly the same approach I would have. I think, as Karen quite nicely showed, there's that approach of starting broad and then getting narrower and then narrower down to this is exactly what we've done to identify the gaps in the literature. But yes, it often takes several goes backwards and forwards to get that introduction right. And in terms of the size, there's no rule of, I guess, how big the introduction should be as such. It shouldn't be longer than the combination of your methods and results. That doesn't seem the right balance, but you know, it needs to be more than one paragraph or two paragraphs, obviously. So it's usually, you know, a couple of pages maybe in terms of the length, but that does differ from, yeah, depending on the journal and things like that. Probably getting a sense from when you're selecting your journal, you know, having a look at other examples in that journal as to what people do can be helpful as well. And you think your third one was finding the journal?
Yes, I understand. Thank you very much for your answer.
Yeah, and the finding a journal, I think, was your third question. Yeah.
How to find best journal and for match with our research.
Yeah, I think if you start writing your paper or look at, you know, the articles that you've collected that are relevant to your research and look at what journals they were published in, then that is a really good indicator, because it shows, firstly, that that journal is interested in that topic, and also that other people who are interested in that topic are going to be reading that journal. So, you know, when you collect the literature that's relevant, maybe there's 6 or 7 different journals that those articles are from. And so maybe use those as your starting point. Look through, you know, what quality are those journals, which one is best suited. You know, and there's financial factors as well. Some journals it costs a lot of money to publish in, and maybe you don't have the money to publish in those journals. I know when, you know, I've been writing papers and I look at the journals and go, oh, that costs $3,000 to publish. I can't publish in, I don't have $3,000 for that, so cross that one off the list. So there's, you know, you've got to weigh up, you know, lots of different factors when you're choosing your journal. So you're always aiming for the highest that you can get, but you have to be realistic as well.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. Is there any question? Okay, yes, please rise and mention your name.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Karen, for the opportunity. Let me introduce myself. My name is Aisyah. I am from Public Health Department. So maybe my question a little bit out of the topic today, but I really want to know about your opinion. So my question about the number of citation. Is the from your opinion, do the journal we have chosen before for the submit article are affected to the number of citation we got? Because I think the number of citation we got is really important for us, especially as a lecturer. Thank you.
So I think the question is around how important is things like the sample size, that you've got enough in the decision, you know, where to publish and those type of things, I guess. Is that correct? Yes?
Do you want to take that one?
I think it's definitely going to be an important consideration. If you haven't got a sufficient sample size to have been able to show, say, a difference, if that's what you're trying to measure, and it does depend on the type of research we're talking about. So sample sizes have traditionally been around where you're making a comparison, you're trying to compare something with something for a difference between them. And there are obviously power calculations and statistical calculations that can work out how many subjects would you need to be able to show that there's this bigger difference in the outcome because that's a meaningful difference between the two outcomes. So that's one type, and that's probably more in my area in pharmacy. That's usually more about like drugs, and you know, when a new drug comes along and tries to show itself to be better than an old one, and you looking at the sample size, could they have proven, did they have enough patients in the study? But I do a lot of other research, which is surveys and things like that, where sample size is different. It's more around the precision of your estimates. So there are calculations that you can make around how many patients would you have to have, or how many survey responses would you need to have a plus or minus 5% accuracy. And the magic number is somewhere around 360 or something like that when you do the calculation. I guess if you don't have sufficient, all it means is that the results are less precise. It doesn't mean they're not the results, it's just that the confidence intervals are usually broader, which means there's more uncertainty in the results. You can acknowledge that in the limitations around the sample size. But it's really important when you do write those limitations is that you don't leave the reader feeling like, oh, well, it's obviously been a waste of time. So you kind of got to say, although it was a small sample size, we still think it's important because we're the first people to have actually looked at this and sell why it's still a good thing, even despite the small. So acknowledging it, but yeah, not just leaving the reader feeling, oh, well, this has obviously been a bad study and I shouldn't have read it. So it's, yeah, make sure in that limitations you talk about, despite that, it's still important. You know, we've done something new and different that no one else has done. So the sample size just means, as I said, lack of precision if you're talking about a survey or something like that. Yeah, I hope that helps.
I think in the ideal world, if you're just starting your study, you should get a statistician to develop a statistical plan and tell them what you want to do, and they will tell you how many people you need, or you know, how many animals you need, or whatever, to have the right statistical power to answer the question that you want to answer. So that's, you know, if you're just, you know, at the start of the project, that's the best approach.
One last question. Yes?
Student from medical, Faculty of Medical, Jenderal Soedirman University. Do you want to ask the speakers? Yes, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Marcela Gloria. I'm from Mexico City. Well, hi. What do you think about ChatGPT? Do you know that thing?
Yeah.
And do you think that is a good tool to carry out a research project? Because in my country, all of the students use it to research information.
Yeah. ChatGPT, I've used ChatGPT, and I use it sometimes like for my teaching to make multiple choice questions and do things like that. We just have to be careful, I think, you know, like in my talk it said about you can put in your abstract and ask it to make a summary, or you can put in a something that you've written and ask it to improve the English or the structure. I think it's going to be really useful for those things. You need to be careful, I think, if you're using it in research, that you don't put in research that you haven't published yet, because it eats the information and then it will give it out to other people as well. So you need to just be careful about that, because it records everything. You know, it's part of its engine. For doing more like confidential, like if you want to keep something confidential, our university has subscribed to a AI tool called Copilot, which is part of the Microsoft tools. And so it is an AI engine, but it doesn't, any of the information that you put into it is confidential, so it doesn't get taken into the information. Yeah. So yeah, just be aware of that. I think it's important, to be careful.
Especially if you're putting in, say, your exam question to test how it goes, and now it's out there, so next person, they've already got the exam question, sort of thing. Yeah. And it does make mistakes, lots of mistakes. It doesn't, as we said, it doesn't think, it just kind of puts together information. So you definitely need to check anything it says, particularly if you've used it to if you're not using it to summarise your own information or your own writing, and you're asking it things like, write me a paragraph on the epidemiology of drug use in the elderly, it'll write a beautiful one for you. But just make sure that the numbers it quotes are correct. You can ask it to give you references, and you can go and check the references. But yes, don't just take it verbatim because it makes mistakes. I certainly found it claims, a certain percentage or whatever, and you check it, and that's nowhere in the publication. You can't find it anywhere. You don't know where they got that from. Then we've got one last question.
Okay. This would be my last question for this session. I'm sorry, I prolonged the time. Okay, let me introduce myself. My name is Nindya. I'm from Public Health Department. I'm one of the lecturers there. And I have this question because since we taught the undergraduate students, and they must be interested in writing scientific for the academic purpose, especially to publish their first thesis or something. And do you have special tips or trick for the first writers as a student, undergraduate students, how to scientifically writing to publish into journal, especially international journal, since we know if we don't have this specialty or we don't have enough experience writing in published journal as in a schema go rank, it must be difficult for us to pass to publish it. And do you guys have any tips or trick for that? Thank you.
Do you have any tips?
You can start.
No. Look, no, it is very challenging writing for international journals, even for ourselves who write in English. It's not about the writing. It's putting the context of your research that'll be attractive to the international journal audience. So sometimes what you've done is so specific to your country, you've got to really, I guess, sell why the rest of the world should know about this as well. So it is always hard to pitch for an international journal. And I guess I don't have great tips except to say that you always have to have that in your mind, is that if I submit something in the pharmacy into, say, the highest ranking pharmacy journal, which is an American journal, I need to, put it into context that they'll understand what you've done is important to be known in America. And sometimes that can be really hard because health systems are so different. So, we might have done a study in Australia in our health system, and it's really only applicable to our health system because the structure and the way we've got what we've done. But you can still think of creative ways of trying to maybe put it out as, maybe you should consider this as, in your country to do what we're doing in our country. So, we've had some examples in pharmacy where the government is paying pharmacists to do various new interventions, including prescribing at the moment, and we've got, we've been doing vaccinations for a number of years. And some other countries don't have that same model of the government paying for things, but you could sell it to say, well, this is, we found this works so well, maybe government should, in your country, think about paying for doing this or something like that. But it is really hard as first off is to know, I think the structures that Karen has nicely given, and we will share these slides, so, the slides will be available for all of you. I think there's the starting points of the step-by-step with some nice tips and, checklists and things like that to start. But yeah, it is always tough to aim at an international journal, and particularly the top international journals.
Yeah. So even though I say aim for the top, maybe at the start, sometimes it's good not to go right to the top, but maybe be more realistic and until you build up a profile. And the more you get published, I was going to say the easier it is, but I don't think it ever gets easy. It's always hard, and it's always discouraging when you do get reviewers' comments back or you get a rejection. But yeah, you just got to keep trying and yeah, improving your paper, and you will find a home for it. Like, it will get published somewhere. I think, yes, the important thing is to write. You know, like, writing is so hard. Just put aside some time to do it. And, yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Karen and Professor David. As far as I know, there are so many non-chart journal, non-APC journal. Yeah, I think it is important for us. So I want to suggestion for you. How about to choose non-chart journal, but with journal there is a reputable ranking, has reputable ranking. Thank you.
Did you get that? Can you just, yeah, could you repeat that? I didn't quite understand.
Oh, how about to choose submit to non-charge journal?
Oh,
To submit to...
Non-charge.
Dr. Karen, do you have tips how to find
Yeah.
the journal that the APC is actually in the low, not
Yeah.
the high APC? So, or free, like,
Free.
do you have some experience how to find the journal, but the charge for the manuscript is not too high?
Oh, yes.
Like low cost.
Yeah, that's
is-
important to consider.
Yeah, important
Yeah.
for us, I think. It is
Yeah.
possible free, free of charge.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think you really just need to go, like, find the journals that are of interest, and then look at the particular journal site. Like, go to the website for the journal and look. A lot of journals, like for places like Indonesia, they might have special rules, like the costs. Probably there'd still be a cost, but it would be lower than for us. But there's still quite a few journals where you can publish for free, but you just got to search through. Once you've found the journals that you like or want to publish in, go through and check each one individually, go to their website and find whether they have publication charges. In a lot of journals you can publish for free, but then if you pay extra, they make it open access. You know, so anyone can access it, but sometimes if you publish for free, it's behind a paywall, so not as many people can access it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Still have a time or enough?
Yep.
Enough? Yes,
I
okay.
think so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. David and Mrs. Karen. This time to committee for giving certificate to the speakers. Mrs. Dian. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's the wrap up of this event. Thank you very much for your coming in this event. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.